about the lifting the state of emergency.
Correct.
If you, what are some of the aspects you want people to understand about that?
I think it's really understanding what it doesn't mean. There's definitely been a lot of chatter on social media about, well, does this mean that COVID's over? Does this mean that we're going to open everything up? I think we first need to look at why we declared. Okay, so when an emergency happens in a community, whether it be a man-made emergency or a natural disaster, we have our emergency operations center, and we activate that. And part of what the control group looks at is the continuity of operations for the town. So making sure that we can still operate as normal even during an emergency. And when COVID first happened and we activated the Emergency Operations Center, and we went through, there's actually a questionnaire that you go through to look at the stages of where you're at in your response. And it became evident to us very early on that we were in a state of emergency. And we had to figure out how to continue to do normal operations for the residents of Cobourg while doing it in a different way. So whether it be virtual. Some of the early examples of that, when we declared, council, so our continuity of government for the town of Cobourg, was able to continue during that emergency by doing things virtually. Now fast forward, we're into the end of July, and we're not in necessarily a response mode to COVID. We are actually in a recovery mode. And because we're now into recovery, a lot of the uncertainties have been taken care of. We have plans in place. We know how to deliver services now, whether it be doing it virtually or in some accommodation to continue during the pandemic. So while the town has lifted the declaration, that does not mean the emergency is over. The Emergency Operations Center is still active. It is active 24/7, and at any point, depending on what we need to deal with, we're able to do that. But removing the declaration was indicating to the province that we at this point were not in need of any more resources. A lot of people assume that a declaration comes with it money, that you declare because of money. And it's not because of money. We declare due to capacity. Does the town have capacity to get through the emergency, or are we going to need more resources? And when I say resources, I don't mean necessarily monetary resources. In the case of flooding, maybe we need some specialized piece of equipment to come in and clear out a creek bed. That would be an example of resources that we could call on, and by declaring, the provinces, we're plugged into the province and they're aware that we may need more resources.
One thing I think there's a misconception of, some people are very vocal online about what they like, what they don't like, what should be done, what shouldn't be done, what the town is doing good, what the town is doing bad. But I've always said they're doing the best. This is a first-time thing for the world, really, or in recent memory. Like in our lifetime, it's the first time for the world. But the bottom line is, you're doing. I take it you're doing the best with what you have, with the information you have at that time.
Absolutely. And I think that's been part of the challenge in managing this emergency through COVID, is that it was evolving on a moment-by-moment basis, and new information was continually coming into us. Different than a different emergency where, yes, you have more information being fed in, but it's not contradicting usually itself. And let's face it, during the initial stages of COVID, we did feel, it didn't look like it was going to affect Canada. It was early on, numbers. Then that changed. We weren't going to shut our borders. Then we did. It was constantly changing, and it was changing with different information, daily. Now we all are getting used to, wearing our masks, going into buildings, where early on that information wasn't there for us.
And even though you've lifted the state of emergency, that's not to say if or when a second wave hits that it couldn't be reinstated.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. At that time, if really while the EOC is fully activated right now, on a moment's notice, if we needed to, the emergency control group would advise the mayor and council, and we could redeclare if it was necessary.
last question. Tell me basically what the EOC does, or when you have your meetings. Like, is it who meets? Like, is it leaders in the community, things like that? And what is? I know you can't talk specifics because it's closed doors, but I mean, tell me about in general what happens.
So the EOC stands for Emergency Operations Center, and every municipality is required to do so by the provincial government. And we meet during an emergency. So when I say activate or stand up the EOC, it just means that everybody receives an alert. We have an alert system that calls everybody in. And it is it's an operations team, so it's high level operations for the town, and it's all the functions that you would require to continue to run the corporation on the emergency side of it. So managing that.